Bottlecap Vikings is a 2 to 4 player game by Tasty Minstrel Games, using the rondel movement mechanic. Players are attempting to get either first to 10 glory, or the first one to build the throne room in their castle. Play begins with players choosing their starting locations on the rondel octagon, and then going in turn order, moving 1 to 3 spaces along the islands. When landing, they will immediately take place of their action, in this case gaining either gold or wood based on what they have the least of. As players progress around the circle, they can potentially land on one another. In doing so, they take a damage icon from the box. When taking damage, a player will add it to their tableau. If a player ever reveals the 4th red damage icon, then immediately all damage is scored. Players can lose 2 gold, a glory, or 2 gold and a glory, dependent on how many Vikings they have in their play. As players proceed around the game board, they will also pass the red line, which, if passed, they will also take damage from the Vikings, as well as passing the helper, which will potentially heal them of damage if they have followed the right path on their tech tree. The tech tree starting at the base, and then being upgraded along various tech lines, granting you various abilities. As you progress, you have to remember where you previously progressed from, so as to remember what abilities carry with you later on in the game. As you circle around the game board, you will have the various aspects, which include the building tile, which when landed upon enables you to build along that tech tree. Yep. As players go to the various locations, they'll have the ability to spend or gain gold, which is tracked along the tracking tiles section, which goes anywhere from 0 to 10. As you gain resources and gold, you'll be moving that up. As you spend them, you'll be moving it down. Players will also note that they have different crown icons along the edge, which indicate what level they are able to build to within their castle. This has been Bottlecap Vikings. Let's see what we think about it.
Games, I think they have a series of them. Harbor, I think, was another one of theirs. I generally tend to like them. So yeah, this was one of TMG's smaller games. Harbor was another one of theirs, where they pack a lot of gameplay into a small package, which I greatly enjoy. That said, it's not a big box game. It's a small box game. So what you're going to find is a lot of interesting mechanics, or rather a select few amount of interesting mechanics all woven together. Yeah. I think it played well for what it was, right? This is, I would call it a filler game, 45-minute type gameplay. Enjoyable lunch break game.
Yeah. I
would play it again. Probably not one of my favorite smaller games, but definitely a fun little game. It reminded me of the Aaliyah small box games. Glenn Moore, kind of similar in that fashion.
Yeah, Eric, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I didn't have a lot of expectations coming into it, just from what Brian had described as what it kind of entailed, but I wasn't too familiar with the rondel, I guess, games. We've kind of stuck to more, I think, the more in-depth, so I wasn't used to this kind of game.
I mean, we had Luna, which was on the larger side.
It was on the larger side, but...
Also TMG.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was really just easy to learn, so...
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. It's a simple game. There were points where it's like, oh man, someone's running away with it, and all of a sudden we're like, actually, it's a really close game. And it was quite balancing in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we all had similar ideas on the mechanics. I had watched a few reviews and watched some tutorials in advance, and I found a lot of people were kind of upset for things that I thought were, they didn't really matter. Okay. Like, you have to remember where you advanced, and it's not hard to remember what you advanced.
Yeah,
you did it. You followed a specific tree intentionally.
Right.
So I felt like that wasn't an issue as much as people made it sound like. They have some cool stuff. Like each of these tiles is double-sided, so you can have different abilities based on how they enter the game, which I think is kind of cool. It adds to that replayability factor, which we can talk about in a bit. But I believe the next thing is art and design elements, I guess. What do you guys think? How do you think it looked artistically?
I mean, I think it was decent. The iconography was was a little bit more illustrated than I normally like, but it worked for what it was. Again, it was a small, light game, and okay, so they went a little heavy with the art for some of the iconography, but it was big enough that you could see it. I think it helps that it's like a 4-player game. If it were like a 6-player game, you'd be further away, and some of the logs and like would be a little bit obscured. But I think it was decent. I mean, there's really only is about 5 icons maybe, and then you have arrows. So I think it was good for what it was. I enjoyed it.
I think, yeah, the art was, I mean, it's very cartoony, but like the iconography, for me, it kind of took a little bit of getting used to like what each thing was, having to kind of consult the rule book and the index. It was like, okay, what does this actually mean? But I mean, once you got used to it, it was super easy to kind of know what you were doing.
And the extra components?
Well, we discussed those weren't actually extra, being that, you know,
Technically, these were extra.
These are extra from yeah.
But they're way cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Viking geeples.
Vikiples?
Shipples?
Sheeples.
Shipples.
Shipples.
Yeah.
Shipples.
Sheeples is like sheep.
Yeah.
Yeah, shipples.
But yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. I mean, the art looked intimidating. When you first look at it, you're like, so many icons! And all of a sudden, oh no, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's like 5 of them.
Yeah. But they just seem kind of intimidating at first glance. But how about the theme? I mean, the idea is it's Bottlecap Vikings, small game, Viking theme. Did you feel like Vikings at all? What were your guys' thoughts on the theme of this game?
No, but it kind of made sense with like the Vikings coming out and raiding your ship. But what doesn't make sense is you never raid from shore. Like Vikings were on a ship, then they would go to the town to raid. Like that part thematically doesn't make sense. I almost wonder if they could have redone this like with a fishing theme. You know, you're going around and you're catching fish, and there's certain spots where you collect a certain type of fish. I don't know.
What were you thinking?
Same. I mean, you didn't really feel much like Vikings. I mean, it felt more like you were merchant ships that were kind of circling around a Viking. Yeah, like the Scandinavian.
Vikings in the Mediterranean? It's new.
Yes.
It's new to me.
I love it.
Expanding their empire, you know, and their textiles.
Yeah, but I think that's the only way they could make it stick, where you actually take damage at some point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I had my biggest issue, and it's an issue I see with most rondels, is why am I stuck going around the same island where other people are also going around? Why don't I go find a new area?
No, that would be interesting. Another island expansion or something, where you could technically do a figure 8, or you could keep going around the same thing. Yeah. But they had to constrain it somewhat to cause fighting.
But
right?
but the idea of rondels, I always, as I'm playing them, I'm always like, why don't I venture off? Why do I keep going around the same circle?
You know, so many people ask that every day of their life.
I know. On that note, how about pacing? What do you guys think? How'd this game pace?
I think it was decent. I think it kept a good job trying to stay within that 45-minute bubble. Longer than that, and this would have felt way too stretched, you know? I think since it was, you know, our first time playing, it tended to go a little long anyway. So towards the end, I was getting a little bit bored, but there was a nice little Feldian snap, if you will, where all of a sudden all of us clicked, and we're like, oh, we're within like 4 points of winning, and all of us focused. So I think the pacing worked really well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I agree. I think, you know, it picked up as it went. Each time you played, it'll get faster and faster. There were a few turns where I'm like, oh, wow, like, it's been a while since I've gone.
Yeah.
And a few times, like, other people are like, did my turn get skipped? It's like, no, it's taking a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, as the game went, I felt like it got faster.
I think for me, I mean, I had a little bit longer of a turn just because I had the 2 extra movements, so I had to figure out
True.
spaces.
Options.
Yeah, I had a lot more options than they did. So, I think for me the only thing, just trying to figure out like was taking damage worth it? Was can I skip certain things and just pass? So.
Yeah. So I mean, how about replayability? I just butchered the word replayability. What do you guys think? Is it highly replayable? Not very replayable? What are your guys?
I'd say medium to medium high. It seemed like, you know, every time you play it's going to be a little bit different, but at the same time, for what it is, for the size of the game, there's probably games that better fit that niche.
Yeah. I mean, if it were brought to the table, I'd probably play it, but I don't think I'd be the one bringing it to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I feel. If this was put in front of me, I'd be more than glad to play it. But at that 30-ish minute playtime, there are other games that play 30 minutes that I think I would usually recommend first. But if a friend of mine was like, hey, what's a good game where you sail a boat in a circle trying to gain glory? Then I'd be like, hey, I got one.
Boom, Pandemic Legacy. Right? No?
Yeah.
That's not right at all.
But I mean, I think it works for what it was going for. It's a decent game with the flippable tiles. There is that replayable element. It can play fairly quick, but I think there's an aspect of that barrier of entry. So with new players, be hesitant to bust it out very often.
It's a backpack game, right? It's a small, very portable game that you could pick up at a coffee shop or something like that.
Small footprint, easy to play, pretty much anywhere. I like that. So. Any final thoughts?
Nope.
Thoughtless?
Generally.
Look at the people I have to work with. All right, so that's been Bottlecap Vikings from TMG Games. Tune in next time. Let us know what you guys think. Are there any other good Rondell games that you would recommend we take a look at? Let us know in the comments below.
Do you guys smell what I'm smelling?
I've been trying.
Who was that? That may have been Wilson, but it was not me.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't me.
I can cut all this out, so go ahead and start over.